We're going to talk about one of the greatest books ever written. I'm Adam Barry, TV and film composer, and this is Music Lessons by Pierre Boulez. The book that answered 30 years worth of questions for me. Pierre Boulez was a French composer, conductor, writer, and educator. He was one of the most prominent figures of post-war contemporary classical and avant-garde music. The book Music Lessons is a translation of some of Boulez's most important lectures, delivered from 1976 to 1995. American composer John Adams wrote about this book. Readers can now take stock of the daunting, demanding Boulezian worldview, and whether they warm to his own works or not, appreciate Boulez as one of the most important writers ever about music. There's so much depth and value in these 633 pages that we're going to break it down chapter by chapter. Chapter 1, Invention, Technique, and Language. Since the beginning of the 20th century, music has evolved so quickly that many time-honored principles and rules that we once took for granted have been called into question. Composers have charted much new ground and abandoned almost all previous constraints. To give this quote some context, it's 1976, and the music landscape has been shifting drastically for the last 75 years. At the turn of the 20th century, composers like Schoenberg, Webern, and Berg had abandoned tonal music altogether. And by the 1950s, leading American universities were championing atonal music. In light of these tremendous shifts, Boulez sounded the alarm that no one had yet thoroughly investigated what he called the rational foundations of musical language since the 1800s. He was suggesting that without a full investigation of what was then modern music, it would be difficult for composers to find a path forward. Almost from the start, my own priority has been not so much to codify something that is constantly evolving, as to grasp more precisely how today's music works. Boulez was charting a path that would ultimately lead to an understanding of how all music works. The reciprocity of invention and material is one of the most fundamental characteristics of musical civilization. Creativity and material are inextricably linked. What does that mean? Invention is the notes on the page. Material is the instruments producing the sound. And these two processes are reciprocal. They feed into each other. If we think back to the classical era, the French horns didn't have valves. You were primarily producing the notes in the overtone series, and the players had to use their lips to make every single different note. In the 1800s, valves were introduced which were able to change the length of the pipe, and by doing so, the player could use the lips and the valves and hit a whole bunch of different notes. This changed the way that composers think about writing for French horns. Instrument technology progressed. The composer's imagination progressed. Ultimately, these lead to things like electroacoustic music, electronic music, synthesizers, electric guitars, and all of the technology that we have today to make amazing music. Now, what I've just laid out for you is the ideal relationship between invention and material. However, in 1976, Boulez was concerned that this relationship was out of sync. The materials that composers were using to make their music was so radically new that Boulez even wondered if conventional music notation would be able to contain the sound on the page. Boulez felt that musical practice was lagging behind the composer's imagination, and that this would cause new ideas to be, in his own words, nullified. Boulez had a solution. I propose to move forward by exploring how invention, technique, and language interact in the field of musical composition. And I believe that this exploration could be of great importance to contemporary music, helping it to enlarge its scope, develop its resources, and place itself in the position it should occupy in today's world. Music should not be allowed to simply muddle through the process of its own evolution, trailing behind other art forms. It must be given a chance to become as integrated as possible into contemporary consciousness and to play its part in global endeavors. As listeners now, we have access to more music than any human ever has at any other time in history. Music is integrated into contemporary consciousness, but has it simply muddled through the process of its own evolution? I'm Adam Barry. Thanks for watching. More chapter breakdowns coming soon, plus composing lessons and some scoring tips. Please comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.